In the oldest pages of the Bible there is a single line, a whisper, almost lost in the noise of kings and prophets. It says, "Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him." That is all. No death, no grave, just disappearance. Enoch, a man who was, and then was no more. Who was he? What did he see that made him unlike any other? And why has his story been left in shadows? For centuries, readers of Scripture have lingered on this riddle. A man who lived before the flood, seventh in line from Adam. A man chosen not to die, but to be carried alive into heaven. A man remembered not for his years, 365, but for his walk, his intimacy with God, a mystery bound in silence. But what if silence was not the whole story? What if Enoch himself wrote down what he saw, what he heard, what heaven revealed to him, and what if those words were once considered sacred, only to be erased, forbidden, branded as dangerous? This is the story of a lost book, a book said to have been written not by men alone, but under the guidance of angels, a book that describes visions of thrones, of fire, of judgment, a book that speaks of rebellion in heaven and secrets taught to mankind, a book that dares to describe a Messiah centuries before Bethlehem. It is called the Book of Enoch. For 2,000 years it was whispered about, hunted, hidden, condemned, banned by church councils, declared heresy, erased from the canon. It vanished from Europe, from Rome, from Jerusalem, but it did not die. Far away in the highlands of Ethiopia, a remnant remained. Priests guarded ancient manuscripts in their own tongue, Ge'ez. For them, the words of Enoch were not forbidden at all. They were holy scripture, the voice of a prophet who had walked with God and returned with a warning. Only in the modern age, with the rediscovery of ancient scrolls in caves at Qumran, and with manuscripts smuggled out of Ethiopia, has the wider world begun to hear Enoch again. And his voice is not gentle. It speaks of angels who fell, of knowledge stolen from heaven, of corruption that spread across the earth, and of a figure he calls the Son of Man, a divine ruler who would judge both men and angels. The Book of Enoch does not whisper. It thunders. It proclaims a vision of the universe that could shatter the neat walls of religion. And so we must ask, was it silenced because it was false? Or was it silenced because it was too dangerous to be true? Enoch's mystery begins not with his book, but with his name, and with the hidden trail of fragments that have led seekers back to him. In this journey, we will follow that trail, from the thin line of scripture that hides him in plain sight, to the cosmic visions attributed to his pen, from the church councils that erased him, to the desert caves and Ethiopian monasteries that remembered, from silence to revelation. Enoch walked with God, and though men tried to erase him, his words survived, waiting for the age when we would read them again. This is that age. The descent of the Watchers. The Book of Enoch opens not with peace, but with dissent, not with paradise, but with rebellion. It tells us that in the days before the flood, the heavens were shaken, that angels, holy watchers, appointed to guard the earth, turned their eyes downward and were consumed by desire. 200 of them, led by a chief named Semjaza, looked upon the daughters of men and said, "Let us descend and take wives from among them." And so they swore an oath together upon the heights of Mount Hermon to abandon heaven for earth, to trade their glory for flesh. They came down like fire, and they took women as wives, and to them were born children, not ordinary children, but giants, vast and violent, called the Nephilim. Beings of enormous stature, hungry, restless, unquenchable, they devoured not only the food of men, but men themselves. The earth groaned under their weight, the seas filled with their violence, the skies with their blasphemy. And it was not only children that the watchers gave, they gave knowledge, knowledge mankind was not meant to hold. Azazel, one of their leaders, taught men to fashion swords, knives, and shields, to forge instruments of death. Others revealed the secrets of enchantments, the reading of signs, the power of roots and herbs twisted into sorcery. To women they revealed the arts of vanity, the painting of faces, the adorning of the body, and with these gifts came pride, lust, violence, a darkness spreading like ink across water. Humanity, once innocent, was now armed with weapons, seduced by spells, enchanted by stars. The earth itself became corrupted. Blood cried from the soil, the heavens were defiled, and the cries of the righteous rose upward. The afflicted, the murdered, the oppressed lifted their voices to the throne of God. Enoch writes that the angels of heaven, still loyal, looked upon the earth and wept. They saw the ruin of creation, the corruption of man, the arrogance of the fallen. And they went before the Most High, saying, Lord of lords, God of gods, behold what has become of the earth. Behold the children of men, corrupted by the watchers, consumed by the Nephilim. Shall this go unanswered? And the judgment was set. Enoch tells us that the archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, were sent with commands. Bind the watchers in chains, cast them into the valleys of the earth, into pits of darkness, until the final judgment. And their monstrous offspring, the giants that roamed the world, were condemned to turn upon each other, to destroy themselves in endless war, and to perish by the flood that was to come. This is not the story of Genesis as most know it. Here, humanity does not fall by eating forbidden fruit. Here the fall comes from heaven itself, from angels who abandoned their place and dragged the world into ruin. It is a tale of cosmic rebellion, of forbidden knowledge, of corruption seeded by beings who were never meant to walk the earth. And yet, it is not simply myth. For fragments of this same story echo in Genesis, in Jude, in Peter. Even the Bible itself remembers whispers of giants, sons of God, who lay with the daughters of men, a riddle half told, a puzzle missing its heart. But in Enoch's book, the heart beats, and it beats with fire. The watchers fell, the Nephilim rose. The world was drowned in violence. And one man, Enoch, was chosen to bear witness, chosen to walk among angels, chosen to write what heaven revealed, chosen to record visions of judgment and of the coming of a Redeemer. Enoch, the man who walked with God, and the scribe who dared to write what he saw. From here, the book does not merely tell of angels and giants. It lifts its gaze higher, to visions of heaven, to thrones of fire, to the prophecy of a figure both human and divine, a son of man who would come in glory. The watchers descended, but Enoch ascended, and in his ascent he saw the future. Enoch's visions and the Son of Man. Enoch was not left to wander among giants and ruins. He was lifted, carried by angels into the heights of heaven, not to die, but to see, not to vanish, but to witness. And what he saw was unlike anything mortal eyes had ever beheld. He describes being taken to the ends of the earth, to mountains of flame, to rivers of fire, to places where the stars themselves rise and fall like soldiers marching in obedience to their Maker. He saw the treasuries of the winds, the chambers of the snow, the storehouses of hail prepared for the day of judgment. He saw the paths of the sun and moon, their appointed courses across the heavens, and he heard the voices of angels singing praises that never end. But then he was brought higher still, beyond the stars, beyond the firmament, into the very throne room of the Almighty. Enoch describes the great glory seated upon a throne of crystal with wheels of fire and rivers of light flowing before him. Cherubim and seraphim surrounded him, beings of burning flame whose faces no man could endure, and all creation bowed before him, crying, "Holy, holy, holy." And there, before the throne, Enoch saw the destiny of men and angels alike. He saw the tablets of heaven, where the deeds of every soul were written. He saw the place of the righteous, fields of light, gardens of life, a paradise beyond the reach of corruption. And he saw the place of the wicked, dark caverns where flames rose without end, where fallen angels and corrupted kings await their judgment. But among these visions, one stands above all. Enoch saw one like a son of man, a figure both human and divine, a radiant judge seated upon a throne of glory. The Ancient of Days gave him power, and all nations, all tongues, all kings were to bow before him. This Son of Man would bring justice to the oppressed, light to those in darkness, judgment to the fallen angels, and eternal reign over heaven and earth. Centuries before the birth of Jesus, Enoch's prophecy spoke of a Messiah with startling clarity. A Son of Man who was pre-existent, who was with God before the creation of the world, and who would one day walk among men. For early readers, these words were electric. They did not simply hint at salvation. They described him in language echoed later by prophets, by apostles, by the Gospels themselves. Enoch saw the Messiah before the manger. He saw the judge before the cross. He saw the king before the crown of thorns. And this is perhaps the most dangerous vision of all. For if Enoch truly foresaw Christ centuries before Bethlehem, then his book is not merely ancient myth. It is prophecy, it is revelation, and it cannot be ignored. The early church knew this. They read Enoch, they quoted him. The Epistle of Jude even preserves his words. Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment upon all. But as the centuries passed, these visions became too heavy, too threatening, too impossible to control. A Messiah foretold outside the canon, a book that claimed authority from heaven itself. A prophet who walked with God and left behind a testimony that rivaled Moses and Isaiah. Enoch had seen too much, and he had written it down. If the visions were true, then the silence of the church was deliberate. If the visions were false, then why preserve them in secret for so long? The next chapter in this mystery is not of revelation, but of erasure, for men would decide what heaven had spoken and what must never be spoken again. The erasure of a book. For a time, the words of Enoch were read with reverence. Among the ancient Jews, his visions were cherished. Fragments were carried from synagogue to synagogue, his name spoken with awe. In the early church, too, his book was known. The Apostle Jude quoted him directly. The Epistle of Peter alluded to his visions of the Watchers. Church fathers in the first century spoke of Enoch as if his voice still mattered. But something changed. Something shifted in the halls of power. As the church grew, as councils gathered to define the canon of Scripture, a decision had to be made. Which books were holy, and which were heresy? The Book of Enoch, with its blazing prophecies and dangerous claims, stood at the crossroads. And the choice was made. Enoch was cast out, declared Apocrypha, stripped of authority, erased from the canon of the Bible. Why? The reasons are written not in revelation, but in fear. Enoch told a story of the fall unlike Genesis. He blamed not Adam alone, but angels, divine beings who crossed the boundaries of heaven and earth. That story was too strange, too unruly, a rival to the simple tale of Eden. And Enoch spoke of the Son of Man with such clarity that it threatened to outshine the Gospels themselves. A prophecy of Christ before Christ, outside the chosen canon, was intolerable to those who sought to guard doctrine, to preserve unity, to protect authority. The councils struck Enoch from the record. At Nicaea, at Laodicea, in the centuries of rulings that shaped Christianity, his book was quietly left behind, and soon, deliberately forgotten. Scrolls disappeared, manuscripts crumbled. In Rome, in Jerusalem, in Constantinople, his words were silenced. By the Middle Ages, Enoch's name remained, but his book was gone, lost to Europe, buried beneath centuries of silence. Only whispers endured, legends of giants, rumors of forbidden angels, a line in Genesis that hinted at something more, a quotation in Jude, stripped of its origin. Enoch himself remained, a shadow in Scripture, a man who walked with God and was no more. But the testimony of his pen was gone, sealed away by decree. And so the question lingers, did men silence him because his words were false, or because they feared his words were true? For when truth threatens power, history shows us the pattern again and again. The scroll is burned, the book is banned, the voice is erased. But silence is never perfect. Truth finds a way to survive. And in the most unlikely of places, on the far edge of Christendom, Enoch's words were still being read, still being copied, still being guarded in secret. While Europe forgot, Ethiopia remembered. In the mountains of Africa, within the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, the Book of Enoch never vanished. It was scripture, as holy as Genesis, as true as Exodus, chanted in monasteries, preserved in Ge'ez manuscripts, kept alive through centuries of silence. And one day, the world would rediscover what the Church tried to erase. But first came exile, the long dark silence of a forbidden book, a silence that lasted for more than 1,000 years. And then, the silence broke. Secrets in Exile. For more than 1,000 years, the West believed the Book of Enoch was gone, lost to time, a relic erased. But the truth was different. The book was not gone. It had not perished. It had simply gone into exile. Far from Rome, far from the councils and decrees, in the highlands of Ethiopia, monks and priests still opened Enoch's words. They did not call it forbidden. They called it holy. To them, it was not Apocrypha. It was scripture, as sacred as the Psalms, as eternal as the prophets. In Ge'ez, the ancient tongue of their church, they copied the manuscripts. They chanted its visions. They guarded it through centuries of storms, in monasteries perched upon cliffs, in stone churches carved from the earth. While Europe forgot, Ethiopia remembered. For them, Enoch was not erased. He was alive, still speaking, still warning of angels and judgment, still prophesying the Son of Man, and so the forbidden book endured, hidden in plain sight, preserved at the edges of the Christian world. It was not until the 17th century that Western eyes saw it again. Travelers and missionaries brought whispers of an Ethiopian Enoch. Manuscripts were carried back to Europe, studied in secret, translated with caution. And then, in the 20th century, came a discovery that shook the world. In the desert of Qumran, near the Dead Sea, shepherds stumbled upon caves filled with scrolls sealed in clay jars, ancient texts hidden for 2,000 years, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Among them were fragments, written in Aramaic, that scholars immediately recognized. The Book of Enoch. There in the caves, in the language of ancient Judea, lay proof that Enoch's words were not a Christian invention, not a medieval forgery, but a sacred text revered by Jews before the time of Christ. The scrolls spoke of the watchers, of the giants, of the visions of heaven. They matched the Ethiopian manuscripts that had survived in secret. Enoch had not been silenced. He had been waiting. Like a voice in the wilderness, his words returned at the appointed time, emerging from desert caves and mountain monasteries, demanding once more to be heard. And with their return, the questions awoke again. Why had this book been erased? Why had it been hidden? Why had it been preserved only in exile? The rediscovery could not be undone. Scholars now had the fragments. Historians had the manuscripts. The voice of Enoch rose from exile into the modern world. And once more it speaks of angels who fell, giants who ruled, corruption that drowned the earth, and a Messiah who was to come. But now it speaks not to ancient priests, not to desert monks, but to us, to a world again in turmoil, a world again flooded with forbidden knowledge, a world still haunted by questions of power, corruption, and truth. The exile has ended, the silence is broken, and the Book of Enoch stands before us, challenging us to decide, is this a myth too strange to believe? Or is this the revelation heaven wrote and men tried to erase? For the rediscovery is not only a gift, it is a challenge. Because if Enoch was right, then his visions are not just about the past, they are about the future. And that brings us to the most dangerous question of all. What if the Book of Enoch is true? The forbidden truth. The Book of Enoch has returned. It has survived exile. It has outlived the decrees of men. It has slipped through the cracks of time and stands again in the light of day. But with its return comes a question, one no council can silence, no decree can erase. What if Enoch was right? What if the story of the Watchers was not myth but memory? What if the giants of old were not fables but history? What if forbidden knowledge has always been the true seed of corruption, and humanity's fall began not in a garden, but in the embrace of angels? If so, then the world as we know it rests on a hidden foundation, a story that was buried, a truth men dared not face. And then there is the prophecy, the Son of Man, the one who would come with power and glory, the one seated on a throne of judgment, to weigh the deeds of angels and men alike. Enoch saw him, centuries before Bethlehem, centuries before Galilee. Enoch's vision was clear, too clear to ignore, too dangerous to allow. This is why the book was erased. Not because it was weak, but because it was too strong. Not because it was false, but because it threatened the stories that rulers built their kingdoms upon. And yet, despite fire, decree, and exile, it has returned. The voice of Enoch speaks again, asking not only about the past, but about us. Because the Watchers are not only ancient beings, they are symbols of every power that descends with promises, but leaves corruption in its wake. They are the teachers of forbidden knowledge, the makers of weapons, the seducers of minds. They are the shadow behind every empire, every tyranny, every fall. And the Nephilim, the giants born of that union, they are more than myth. They are the image of excess, the monstrous offspring of pride, greed, and violence. They walk still in the corridors of power, wearing human faces, but carrying the same hunger to dominate. The Book of Enoch does not only tell us what was, it warns us what is, and what may yet come. For if the flood of Noah swept away the first corruption, what storm waits for us now? If Enoch foresaw judgment before, does he still whisper of a final reckoning ahead? This is the forbidden truth, that heaven itself wrote a warning and men erased it, that a prophet saw the shadow of angels and kings and spoke of a Messiah long before his time. That truth is not lost forever, only hidden, until the appointed hour. And now, as you hear these words, you are part of that hour. Enoch's voice has returned. His visions stand open. The erased book has found its way back to the world. The question is no longer what councils decreed or what empires silenced. The question is yours. Will you dismiss it as myth? Will you brand it as dangerous? Or will you dare to see in it a truth too powerful to be erased? The story of Enoch does not end in the past. It lives in the present. It waits in the future. It waits for those who have ears to hear and eyes to see. The Book of Enoch is no longer lost. The question is not whether it will speak. The question is whether we will listen. Thus ended the journey of Enoch, the man who walked with God, who beheld the secrets of creation, and who was taken into eternity without tasting death. His words endure, calling every generation to wisdom, faith, and awe before the Almighty. If these mysteries stirred your spirit, share them with others. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let more seekers discover the hidden truths.